So, if you watch my channel, you know I have a soft spot for horror movies. I absolutely love the horror genre. I think the ability to personally affect an audience by making them not able to sleep at night is one of the most powerful things that filmmaking and the arena of storytelling sort of offers. I think it is one of the most powerful genres of film, and it is also a genre that introduces us to a lot of great filmmakers. A lot of new filmmakers tend to lean towards horror, so we get to see kind of the future of Hollywood within that genre. I think over the last decade, we've really had kind of a resurgence of this genre. For a long time, we had a lot of very boring, very stagnant horror films that sort of follow the same set of beats. But over the last few years, I think we've gotten a lot more creativity in the horror genre, mainly because we've had companies like A24 and Neon really put out original content and let their filmmakers do creative stuff. So for this video, I want to break out some of the best horror movies from the last decade. I'm going to go through 10 movies. I have a couple rules. First things first, any horror movie that's really kind of like a comedy, movies like Bodies, 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 or stuff like that, I do not consider, because those might be like slasher movies or whatever, but they're a lot of fun. These are movies that are literally meant to torment you, and I do kind of stretch that definition. There are some movies in here you might go, that's not really a horror movie. I consider it one. I also kept out movies like Saw and the Halloween franchise, these weird slashers, some of which didn't make the list because they're not very good, and others because I just don't think they're as horrifying as some of these movies. So let's go through it. These are not really in a particular order. Some of the stuff at the top I think are the best, but really this is not the best from worst. I'm just going to go through all of them one by one. First up at number 10 is The First Omen. This is one of the newer films on this list from 2024 and one of the most underrated. The First Omen is a prequel movie to a movie called The Omen, a movie that I never thought we would have to see a prequel for, and it's essentially this explanation of how this boy who eventually is the son of Satan, how he is born into this world, and this is a very different kind of horror movie. It's a horror movie that does not really have jump scares in it. It doesn't have these weird James Wan-y style scare sequences. Instead, it scares you with its story, with its themes, and with its atmosphere. And it's one of these weird movies that I've never really seen too many things that are like this. The movie just makes you feel uneasy throughout its entire watch, and it tells a very good mystery with great acting from the entire cast, and it's just a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I didn't think enough people saw it. I expected this one to be kind of a generic horror movie, and it ended up being a very well-written film that serves its purpose of enhancing the viewing experience of the original Omen. So I definitely recommend you go check out The First Omen. And number 9 is The Coffee Table. This is another one that is a very different kind of horror movie because it is not your typical supernatural horror or like mystery horror. This is a circumstantial horror movie, and I won't even tell you what that circumstance is. This movie can be better described as disturbing than horror, but it is a film that made me feel more uneasy and more just kind of afraid of future things that I may have to experience in my life than pretty much any other movie on this list, except for one that we'll get into later. This is a movie, yet again, I can't really talk about without spoiling the entire premise, which I don't want to do, because discovering the premise is what's so incredible about this watching experience, but the performances here are just so heartbreaking and traumatic. The subject matter is heartbreaking and traumatic, and the balls of the people that made this movie are hard as steel. Good for you guys for getting this thing made. I don't know how you did it, but it is something. I recommend watching this movie if you're somebody that is not afraid of feeling like a piece of shit. And number 8 is No One Will Save You. This is another film that I thought was really kind of unique. It is an alien invasion film, something we get a lot of, but this one stars one girl, a girl that does not talk throughout the whole movie. She's kind of mute, and she is going through this alien invasion scenario where these things are coming after her and haunting her, and we're getting images of her past, traumatic, backstory with this character. We're learning about her as we go through. This character played brilliantly by Caitlin Dever, but it's not just the kind of story that's being told here. I just think the genuine scares with the aliens are really creative and got me. I wish I'd gotten to see this movie in a movie theater. Unfortunately, it was a Hulu release, but there are some really well put together scare sequences in this movie, and this is another one I mainly put on this list because I don't think enough people saw it or talked about it. It was one of the better horror films from last year, and an alien movie that we don't get too many of these days. Most alien movies are very generic. This one I thought offered something a little bit different for this genre. And number 7 is Barbarian, another one that really shocked me and pretty much everybody else that saw it. I remember the trailer came out for this, and it just seemed like a generic-y kind of Airbnb horror story. Of course, they're making a horror story about Airbnbs. What ended up being this movie, Barbarian, was a very kind of creative take on this sort of haunted, I say haunted, but creepy house genre. It's a movie that continuously surprises its audience with twists that you do not see coming. The characters here are all fun to watch. They keep you on your toes trying to figure out what is actually happening, and in the middle of the movie, there is a big twist and kind of a reset that was so unnerving, but also hilarious. I'll never forget the theater experience of when this movie does that flip in the midway point. It's brilliant. I do have some problems with the third act of this film, but it's still one of the better horror films, and I guess slasher films, you can kind of call it, that we've gotten in recent years. Very, very out there with its style, very out there with its kind of bad guy in the movie. I really love this one.
Naked grandma!
Naked, huh?
And number 6 is The Black Phone. Now, this is a movie about a guy who kidnaps a kid. He is a serial killer that kills kids, and we follow this kid as he tries to survive this, serial killer. A serial killer played by Ethan Hawke, who is having so much fun in this role. He is terrifying, he is creepy, and he creates this iconic super villain of sorts in this film, and I cannot wait to see if he comes back and plays him again in the sequel. Wonder how that's gonna happen. But him with his mask and just his personality is so terrifying, and it's everything you expect from a creepy serial killer. The kid is also really good in this film, and how they weave in sort of the supernatural elements and the real elements are really cool, and I love films like this about surviving this serial killer scenario because they feel the most real to me. This felt very Stephen King-y. I don't know if it's based on a Stephen King property, let me know down below, but it felt like a very Stephen King-esque story. But it was really good. I can't wait to see the sequel. I'm so glad Scott Derrickson made this instead of a terrible Doctor Strange sequel. And number 5 is Smile. You might be surprised to see this. This might be the most generic horror movie on this list, but it's a film that I actually really love. First off, it had one of the most creative marketing campaigns ever, just sending people around the country to sporting events, to other things, and having them smile extremely uncomfortably at cameras. It worked. And the movie's a lot of fun. It's a simple story. There's a demon that takes over people and they smile and it's creepy, and the scares here are very, yet again, James Wan-y, very Conjuring, Insidious style scare sequences, but they work. They're always effective, and they're well crafted and well directed in this film. I think the third act kind of gets a little over convoluted. There's a lot of gotcha moments, but I think the overall story they were trying to tell and the performances that are included in that story are really powerful, and it makes the movie so much better than I think it could have been if they had used weaker actors or a weaker script. I think it would have been a disaster, this concept, and it would have been a forgettable horror movie. Instead, it ended up being very good, very fun, and we have a sequel coming that looks to be extremely creative with where it's going in the story. This concept with a celebrity who is famous and has this kind of smile thing that's going on, I love it. And number 4 is Talk to Me, a film made by YouTubers, Danny and Michael Filippo. These guys are incredible. They started on YouTube, and now they're making big Hollywood movies. Talk to Me is a movie that they made in their home country that they did not know would turn into anything, but it ended up being one of the best horror movies, one of the best films of 2023. This is a horror movie that, yet again, when it comes to its scares and its setups, is a little more generic than some of the other movies on this list, but the concept of this hand, that when you touch it, you can communicate with the other side, you can communicate with these spirits, is such a cool metaphor for like how kids experiment with drug use and all this other stuff. The movie and its themes are really, really good here. How the film kind of deals with the idea of death and moving on in the afterlife is the most horrifying aspect about this movie. The scares are there, a lot of the actual scary parts of the movie do work, especially in that third act, but really it's the ending that really hits home the themes of this movie that really freaked me out and kept me up at night. But this movie is crafted like these guys have been making big Hollywood features for decades, and they haven't. This is their first one, and it's brilliant. Go watch Talk to Me. Number 3 is Oppenheimer. I know what you're thinking. Oppenheimer's not a horror movie. It's a historical biopic. No, this is the scariest movie I've ever watched in my life. And if you can't see why it's scary, it's because you're being ignorant of the facts of this movie. We live in a world currently where at any moment in time we are 40 seconds away from the end of everything, from the apocalypse, because nuclear war is a real threat, and this movie shows us the ignorance of humanity and how easily humanity could be pushed to committing an apocalyptic event. I'm not trying to scare you all by making you think about this shit all day, because I think about it all day, but it is a real problem, and this movie, every time I rewatch it, reminds me about how stupid we are as a culture, how stupid we are as a society, and how we're one really stupid person away from accidentally starting a massive genocidal apocalyptic nuclear war. So yeah, sorry guys. Oppenheimer's the scariest movie on this list, I'm gonna be honest. Let's get back to some real horror movies, sorry. Number 2 is Longlegs, one of the newest movies on this list. I think it is the newest movie on this list. A movie that you either loved and thought it was the greatest thing ever, or you hated and thought it was the silliest thing ever. Obviously, I am the former. I thought Longlegs was brilliant. This is a horror movie about a serial killer and an FBI detective trying to catch this serial killer. A serial killer played by Nick Cage. And it's a movie that weaves in real-life things with the supernatural so well. The supernatural is not presented in this movie as a shadowy figure on a wall, this thing that's creeping around and purposely trying to scare you. Instead, the supernatural is presented as a normal person with a smile on its face. It's supposed to be a metaphor for evil can lurk anywhere. Evil could reside in any one of us, and that is the point of this movie, and what really scares me about it. It's also just a brilliantly well-crafted movie that visually is so beautiful to watch, and also Nick Cage gives one of the most hilarious performances ever. It either will terrify you or make you think that Nick Cage is just a silly actor. Whichever one, it's fun to watch. There are really creative jump scares here. The use of sound is some of the best I've seen in a film, literally in years. It is, to me, one of the best serial killer horror movies of the decade, maybe of the last 2 decades. I love it. tell me why you all hate it, because I don't get it. And number 1 for me is Late Night with the Devil, another movie that came out this year. To me, this is the most creative, the most engaging, and the most unique horror movie on this list. A horror movie that decided to be kind of a weird mix of found footage, but also mockumentary in a weird way, of this late night TV episode where this guy is trying to summon the devil to boost his ratings, and we get a lot of story about his past and how he got his position in life, and also this demon that appears on this show, whether it's real, whether it's fake. You get great performances, mainly from David Dastmalchian, who is unbelievable in this film. This film has an incredible pace. It flies by, and it takes you scene by scene through this one episode of TV that just feels non-stop. Just all this stuff's happening, this mystery's unfolding, and the third act, I think, is so brilliant. There is a sequence in this third act that terrified me more than anything on this list, mainly because there was a director involved here that just understood how to build tension. I think back to that quote of Quentin Tarantino talking about the opening of Inglourious Basterds. You want to stretch that rubber band and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it as far as you can until you release it. And there's one scene in this movie that I won't spoil that I feel like it just freaking stretches that thing as far as it could possibly go before releasing, and it works. It's so brilliant. But that's my list. I went through them really quick. Let me know what you thought about down below. Let me know which ones I missed. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 obvious ones that I just forgot. So comment down below your favorite horror movies of the decade so far. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, turn on notifications. I post every single day. I'll see you guys in the next one.